What's up, guys? Today we're going to be taking a dive into the story of the Perron family. I'm not sure if y'all ever heard of the Perron family before, but their story is what inspired the movie The Conjuring. So today we're going to reveal the true events that happened that inspired the movie.
Hi guys! I am Please.
If y'all don't hit that like and follow button, I hope the next time you go to flip your pillow to the cold side, it's warm.
Hold on.
Alright, today we're going to be talking about the Perron family haunting. This is the situation that occurred in the movie The Conjuring, but we're going to be digging into the real life events. Now, the real Conjuring house, people say that this is the most haunted house in the world. Some people actually believe that this house is a portal that Satan uses to bring demons through to our world. Now, since the movie, the real Conjuring house has attracted a lot of attention. There's actually been a bunch of YouTubers that have went here and have actually filmed strange things happening. But before we dig into the story, I want to tell y'all a little bit about the movie. I'm not going to say too much about the movie, just in case some of y'all have never seen the movie. The Conjuring is a horror movie that came out back in 2013. The movie starred Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, playing Ed and Lorraine Warren. It's the first movie in which will become a huge spin-off in different stories, basically all of them revolving around Ed and Lorraine Warren. The movie is set in Rhode Island back in 1971, where the Warrens would come and help the Perron family, who was experiencing crazy paranormal events in their newly bought farmhouse. The Perron family is Roger and Carolyn Perron, and they had 5 daughters with them. In the movie, paranormal events would start happening as soon as they would arrive at their newly bought home. The Perron family dog would not even enter the house. All their clocks would stop at 3:07 a.m. every single morning. And then Carolyn, who played the mother, would wake up with bruises all over her body. This is when the family would decide to contact the Warrens. Now, as I said earlier, I don't want to tell y'all too much about the movie because I don't want to spoil it just in case y'all never seen it. Now, I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about Ed and Lorraine Warren, which in my opinion are 2 fabulous people. In real life, Ed and Lorraine Warren were real paranormal investigators and authors associated with some of the most prominent cases of legend hauntings. Ed was born September 7th of 1926, and he was a World War II veteran and a former police officer before diving into the paranormal. He called himself a self-taught demonologist, and he was an author and lecturer. Lorraine was born January 31st of 1927 and claimed to be a clairvoyant and medium. She would see visions, and she would also say that she could not control the visions that she would see, and she worked very closely with Ed. Ed and Lorraine got married in 1945, and Lorraine gave birth to their only child, a daughter named Judy, on January 11th, 1946. Ed and Lorraine were devoted Catholics, and they believed that demonic forces were likely to possess those who didn't have faith. In 1952, the Warrens founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, which is the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. The Warrens wrote many books about paranormal stuff, and they claim to have even investigated well over 10,000 paranormal events and hauntings. Now, a lot of people didn't believe the things that Ed and Lorraine were doing. They didn't think that kind of stuff was real. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this right now don't believe in that kind of stuff neither. But not only did the Warrens say everything that happened in the movie really happened, the Warrens were actually there while they were filming the movie, just to make sure it went down as they remembered. As a matter of fact, they had to remove some of the things that happened in real life from the movie. They said it was just too graphic and they felt it was just too much for people to see. Even the real Perron family also gave their support to the movie. They had all already came together to support one of the daughters' books about their experiences and decided that they could consult on the film as well. This brings us to the Perron family haunting, the true story that inspired the movie. In 1971, the Perron family moved into their new farmhouse. Now, this farmhouse sat on 200 acres of land. You can only imagine 200 acres of beautiful farmland. The mother and the father super excited that their daughters was going to get to grow up in this farmhouse. There was 14 rooms and it was over 3,000 square foot. However, the Perron family would notice immediately strange things started to happen in this house. The man that they actually bought the house from was still there when they arrived. So this man would take Roger on a long walk and he would tell Roger, please keep the lights on in the house. Every light in the house must be on for the sake of your children. Things started small. The mother would notice that things would go missing or seem to move from place to place on their own. She would also hear the sound of something scraping against a tea kettle in the kitchen when nobody was even in there. She would even find small piles of dirt in the middle of the kitchen floor, just like somebody had swept it up and started to clean it. The 5 daughters would begin to notice that there were harmless spirits, or what they would consider to be ghosts, roaming around the house. One time it was even said that a couple of the girls saw 2 ghosts in a room, or what looked to be ghosts, and they were pointing at the girls like they were the spirits, or like they were actually the ghost. The girls would also come running to their parents and tell them that there was a boy, like a little boy ghost, roaming around the house. However, the family would soon find out that these ghosts or spirits that they were seeing in their house, not all of them were harmless. And the spirit that was shown in the movie, Bathsheba, she was the worst of them all. Andrea Perron, the oldest of the 5 daughters, would say that she believed Bathsheba resented her mother, because Bathsheba believed that she was the mistress of the house and that her mother was basically like competition. So she hated the girl's mother. Because of all the strange things that was happening in the house, Carolyn decided to do research on the house and find out exactly what happened there. Carolyn started to kind of put the pieces together, like when the old man told Roger that they needed to leave the lights on in the house for the sake of the children. Someone else would actually tell them that the people that lived in the house before them actually kept their lights on 24/7. So as Carolyn researched the history of the house, she discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of the people that lived in the house died under mysterious and horrible circumstances. Several of the previous children drowned in the creek. One child had been murdered, and a few of them also took their own life in the attic. There's also records of people poisoning themselves, and 4 different people that they know of froze to death. So there was all these strange deaths, like the people going in the attic, and they all ended it the same way. The other children drowning in the same creek, and the other people freezing to death. You can imagine Carolyn's shock. The more Carolyn researched, she began to find out that there was a real person named Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the parents' property in the mid-1800s. Bathsheba was a stay-at-home wife, while her husband Judson Sherman worked as a farmer on their land, and they were pretty well off. Bathsheba and Judson had a son named Herbert in 1849, and it is rumored that they had 3 other children as well. It is also rumored that none of their children lived past the age of 7. But get this, it is also rumored that Bathsheba was a Satanist, and there was even evidence that she had been involved in the passing of a neighbor's baby. However, no trial ever took place, but the baby's passing did happen while she was in the care of Bathsheba. Bathsheba was babysitting her. Now remember that it is rumored that none of her children lived past the age of 7 years old. Now when the neighbor's baby was examined, it was determined that the fatal wound that cost this baby its life was a large needle to the base of the skull. The town began to believe that Bathsheba sacrificed this baby to Satan. Bathsheba herself died on May 25th of 1885, and local legend has it that Bathsheba died from a bizarre form of paralysis and literally turned to stone. The Warrens and the Perrons both believe that it was Bathsheba's spirit that was causing them all these problems. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, they also experienced other spirits in the house as well, and these other spirits smelled real strong of like rotting flesh. They would come into a room and almost become sick just from the smell. The first time that the daughters would know that something was in this house would be within the first 5 minutes of them arriving. They was all unpacking the van, and Andrea, the oldest daughter, her dad handed her a box, and on that box it said kitchen on it. So she grabbed the box and she was toting it in the house. She came into the parlor and she took a right and was going through the dining room. And sitting at the table was Mr. Kenyon. Mr. Kenyon is the guy that sold them the farmhouse. Behind Mr. Kenyon, standing in the corner of the dining room, was an oddly dressed man, and his attention was focused on Mr. Kenyon. So Andrea greeted him because she was a very polite child. She said, "Good morning, sir," and he never replied. So she carried the box on to her mom. And once she reached her mom, she set the box down and she said, "Mom, who's that man in there with Mr. Kenyon?" And her mom would reply, "There's nobody in there with Mr. Kenyon. He's in there by himself, sweetheart."
I walked into the dining room and I saw an oddly dressed man in the corner of the dining room. And I greeted him because I was a polite child. I said, "Good morning." And he didn't respond to me. His focus was entirely on the elder gentleman who was moving out of the house, who had sold it to us. And so I kept going, and I walked in the kitchen and said, "Mom, who's that other man with Mr. Kenyon in the dining room?" She said, "There is no other man in the dining room." And then Nancy came in, Christine came in, Cindy came in, and the last sister came in and said, "That man in the dining room just disappeared."
And this would kind of spook Carolyn because she was wondering what her daughters were seeing. The very first night in the house, Cindy, which is Andrea's younger sister, would come in Andrea's room and asked if she could sleep in the bed with Andrea. Once Cindy was in the bed with Andrea, she would then tell Andrea that she was hearing voices in her room. Not one voice, but multiple voices, and they were all speaking at once. But they were all saying the same exact thing. "There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the walls."
And then my darling little sister Cindy crawled into bed with me. She said, "Annie, can I sleep with you?" I said, "Sure." I pulled the quilt back and let her in. She snuggled up real close and she said, "I hear voices in my room and they're all talking at once, but they're all saying the same thing." And I asked her, "What are they saying?" And she said, "There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall."
Now you can only imagine how terrified these girls must have been, experiencing stuff like this all the time. It was even said that beds would rise up off the floor when you was laying in them, and that every time their father would go into the basement, he would feel a cold, stinking presence behind him. They tried to stay out of the basement as much as possible, but it was very hard because the heater was down there, and the heater seemed like it was always breaking. So with this heater just randomly breaking all the time, the father would always have to go down there to fix it. And every time he was down there, he would feel this presence. He said one time he even felt someone rubbing on his back, and he was down there alone. But every single time he was in the basement, he would smell the smell of stinking, rotting flesh. And the reason why they never just packed up and moved away, they was completely financially broke. They spent every penny they had to purchase this farmhouse. So basically they was just stuck with the house and everything that came with it. However, whenever the Warrens got involved, Carolyn apparently told Lorraine about an incident where Carolyn was lying on the couch and all of a sudden she felt a sharp stinging pain on her leg. And whenever she looked down at it, she noticed a puddle of blood was on the floor. And then she noticed on her leg there was a little tiny hole and the blood was running down her leg. So Carolyn looked around all over the couch and was looking for anything that might have stabbed her, making this puncture hole in her leg, but she found nothing. Later on in one of Andrea's books, she would describe her mother's wound as being like a little perfect puncture hole, like a sewing needle had been stabbed in her calf. Whenever Carolyn told the Warrens about this incident, she also told them about Bathsheba. Lorraine started believing that Bathsheba could have brought her needle to the afterlife. So that's what she could have possibly used to stab Carolyn in the leg. Over the 10 years that the family lived in this house, the Warrens made multiple trips to investigate. At one point, Lorraine conducted a seance as an attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing the family. During this seance, Carolyn became possessed. She started speaking in unknown languages. Her and the chair she was sitting in started to levitate in front of everybody. Now, the movie shows Ed performing the exorcism, but Lorraine says that her and her husband would never perform one because they must be performed by a Catholic priest. The Warrens would later admit that this case was a bit more than they had bargained for. Now, during this seance, not only was Carolyn being levitated off the floor, she was also slamming into the walls. So Carolyn became very injured. After this seance was over with, Roger would kick the Warrens out of the house because he was real concerned for his wife's safety. According to Andrea, the family continued to live in this house until 1980. Andrea also said after they moved out of the house, they didn't experience any more paranormal activity. She said whenever they left the house, they left all the angry spirits behind. Since the Perrons sold the house has had a few owners. The owners of the house today sells tickets, so you could purchase a ticket and go check the house out if you wanted to. But if you're like me, you ain't finna buy no ticket. They probably had to pay you to go see the house. I ain't finna go in that damn house. They made a movie off of that house. You want me to go in this house? I seen the movie a bunch. We ain't having no part 12 about no Matthew. It just ain't happening today. One more thing I'd like to say. If it was me in their shoes back in, I don't care how broke I was. I'm leaving first day. We ain't sticking around. You seen a dude in the dining room? That's good enough for me, babe. Let's go now. Let's go now. Oh, what about the silverware that I just told? We can get more silverware at the dollar store, bitch. Get in the truck. Now. Well, that's it for today, guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed the story. Remember, if you're a fan of the strange and the unexplained, make sure you hit the sub button, like all my videos, and ring the bell so you get notified every time I go live. This is Matthew, MrCraft, baby. I'm out.